Today we're going to create a very basic console app as a first application to build, and one that will actually do some very simple processes and algorithms running in it. So start off, we want to create a console app on the .Net framework with C#, because that's what we're going to be coding in. And when it comes up, you're going to want to browse to where you want to save it to. Now, I'm already in the right place, but make sure that you are saving this somewhere where you'll be able to find it and remember it in order to run the application at the end if we decide to do a build. So I'm going to call this program 1 hello world, because we're going to start off with the classic hello world start for programming. When we click OK to that, Visual Studio will start thinking about things and will hopefully create the program and the project for the program ready for us to start coding in. Now, do not expect when you load Visual Studio for your text to be the same size as the text on my screen. I've zoomed it in so that you can actually see what I am typing without having to strain your eyes. So, a few things first. Visual Studio allows us to call on a lot of pre-assembled code that we can use without having to write everything ourselves. So all of this bit here is pre-assembled code pulling from a system class and a system namespace being here, that we can access without having to code it ourselves. It means that we can use a lot of basic things like using the void or the static in the methodology, in this case the main methodology, which is where most of our programming goes. You will notice that it will come up and say class as a program, or in this case class is program, because it's the main program. That is because C# is primarily used for object-oriented programming. We're not going to do an object-oriented program with it today. However, we will look at that coming up in future videos. So let's make a start. Now we're doing a console app, so we need to make sure that we are actually directing the console to do something. What we're going to start with, displaying on the console, on the screen, just the phrase hello world. So because we want to tell the console, we start off typing console. Now you will notice this lovely little pop-up here. It's called Intellisense, but what it actually allows us to do is to cut down on the amount of typing that we're doing. So instead of typing the entire word console, I can select the word console using the arrow keys and press enter. You will also notice, hopefully, that the word console is blue. This color coding is something that Visual Studio uses, and a lot of other IDEs, or integrated development environments, use to help keep track of different pieces of code. Now, we specified we want the console. Now we need to tell it what to do on that console. So we put in a dot, and in this case, we want it to write a line of text. Fairly straightforward. So console.writeLine, fairly straightforward. Now this is a method that we are calling. It's instructions to the program. But we don't need to write the method like we will do with things that we will see further down the line of programming, because it's already in that systems that we looked at the top. What we do need to do is tell the program what the console is to write on this line. So we do that using brackets, and because it's text that we want it to write, we also use speech marks. The speech marks say, basically, do this in exactly the way that I have told you to write it up on the screen. It stops it trying to interpret it as a piece of code and keeps it as a piece of pure text. So let's put in hello world, which is our classic start of programming. Now I draw your attention to this red squiggle that I've got going on over here. And if I hover over it, you will see that it is showing a semicolon with the word expected. I appreciate that might be slightly hard to see. Unfortunately, I can't control the size of the text that comes up on the drop downs. This is a syntax thing. So the syntax is the way in which the text is laid out, and it is the way in which we need to write the code so that the computer recognizes it and is able to process it. The end of most lines of code in C#, especially if we're doing something like a console.writeline, is to put a semicolon. That tells the program, it tells the computer this is the end of this piece of code. Now, there is one thing that we need to do before we run and test this program. At the moment, once the console has written hello world, it will just close because we've not told it to wait for input from the user before it closes. Now you'll notice I'm leaving a bit of space here. That's because I'm going to put some more code in there. But we want to tell it to take input from the user. So making sure you use the arrow keys so that the selection is blue, unlike what I've just done. Console.writeline. And we're going to put in here, press the enter key to close. So we're giving an instruction to our user so they know what to do to close the program. There is a semicolon, and then to read the enter key when it's pressed, we want to do a console, and we want to read a line, which, funnily enough, is readline. Now this is still a method, so we still need the curly brackets, but we don't need to put anything in them because we are checking to see whether there is an input from the user, not doing an output from the program. So if we look at this now, in fact, if we run this, let's run this, what we should get is a nice console popping up any second now. And it will say, hello world, and then press the enter key to close. Press the enter key, the console closes. So at the moment, it is working exactly as we need it to. Now, I will at some point be talking about the use of case, uppercase and lowercase, and the relationship that it has between methods and being used for methods and variables. But as we don't have any variables at the moment, I will save that particular bit for a little bit later on. Now, one thing that is standard practice that we've not done so far is to comment the code. We comment code so that other people, when they come in to edit or work with our code further down the line, if say we're not with that company anymore or we're working as a group on a coding project, and we comment it so that they know what we were thinking and what that piece of code does. Most common way of commenting code is to use the line comment. So I've just put 2 forward slashes, which tells the program this is a comment. And then I'm going to put in here, program says hello. Program says hello. We don't need to put a semicolon at the end of that. It's not a piece of code. All that is an instruction or a note as to what is happening in the piece of code that we've just written. Let's go here, instructions to close program. And that's that bit commented. So now we know what we need to do. Or rather, we know what that piece of code is doing. Right. doesn't really do much at the moment, so let's give this a little bit more functionality. Now this is where variables are going to come in. Remember, variables are a way in which we hold a piece of data. So let's start with let's get the user's name. So console.writeline, and let's have, what is your name? I apologise for any spelling errors. My fingers work faster than my brain. Punctuate it correctly as well. And semicolon at the end. And then we need to read the line that the user puts in. Except this time, unlike when we've read the line at the bottom here for pressing the enter key, we want the user to enter text, and we want to be able to call that text back into the program. Now, this is where we start introducing variables. There are two main places you can put a variable. If you want a variable to be accessible in different methods, you would put it in the class, but outside of the methods themselves. So here is our class. This is our main method where all our code goes. As we are working just in this main method at the moment, we don't need to access anything outside from a different method. We can store our variables directly in the method. Being able to do this serves two purposes. Firstly, any methods that we don't want to be accessed from any other part in our program, we can put into the method that we want it to use. Any other variables we don't want to be used, sorry, not any other methods. Any methods that, any variables that we want to use in a different methods, they can go inside the class, but outside of the methods, and they are visible then to any method that wants to use them. This will become more important as we move on to more complex programming and as we move on to object-oriented programming designs. So let's start off and let's get this variable in here. So we want to hold someone's name. Data type for holding a name is a string. So there is our string, and let's just call the string name. Right, let's call it username. As I said, I would go back to the naming conventions and the use of case. Now we've got two bits in this program at the moment. Anything that is a method or higher than a method, so the class and the namespace, uses what we call Pascal, which is an uppercase letter at the start of every word. So if we look at Readline, or if we look at Readline, both of those words have uppercase letters, saying this is a method. When it comes to variables, we use camel case. It's another way of making sure that we know what is a method and what is a variable when we're using it through our program. So string username. Now what we want to do is we want to get the information, in this case the name that the user types in, and pass it into that username variable. So username, and we want it to equal console dot, oops, looks better if you type the whole thing, console dot readline, and our semicolon at the end. We also will want to check whether or not the user's name has been picked up and passed to that variable. So let's get the program to write this out so that we can check. So console.writeline. Now, this is where it gets a bit different. So far, everything we've had, we have put into speech marks. In this case, we want it to show a variable. So we don't need to put the speech marks around our variable. Console.WriteLine username. Save that. It does save when you test the program to do debugging. So now we've got hello world. What is your name? Let's say my name is Jess, for lack of a better option. And I press enter. It now says Jess. We have successfully passed the input from the user to the variable for the username, and the program can now output that username. At the moment, just putting the username doesn't really feel particularly user-friendly. So we can mix text and variables that we are calling from the program. So let's just put hello in there, and we space it out so it's easy to see with a plus. So we want it to say hello plus the username. Now there is a slight problem with this, and if I run the program, we'll see what it is. And this is where English and the written word does come into play. You may notice that where I've told it to say hello Jess, or hello username, there is no space, because we haven't actually told the program that we want to put a space between the hello and the username. We have to physically type the space into speech marks so that when we run the program, you can see it actually then comes up as a sentence. So that's all well and good. We've said hello. What else can we get this program to do? Well, let's push the boat out and let's do some simple mathematics with it now. So let's do a simple two-figure addition sum. There we go. We are going to need to do a simple two-figure addition sum to add 3 new variables to our program. We need, firstly, the 2 numbers that we're going to get from the user, and we're going to want to hold the answer to those numbers. Numbers are represented by int, which is short for integer, but because we are getting information from the user, which is a string information, and we have to convert it, we can't just use int as a variable on its own. We need to use a special type of int, which is an int32. So int32, and let's have num1, int32 num2, remembering that our cases should match and this is a variable. For anyone who's wondering about the green squiggly line, it's because there's a variable that we haven't used yet anywhere else in our code. And we are going to want an int32 num answer. So those green squiggles will disappear once we have written our sum. First thing we need to do is we need to get information from the user. So we need to tell it what we want the user to give. So console.WriteLine, as our open brackets. Now you may have noticed so far that all the lines of text have been very close together on the console. So let's put a space or a line break in between this. So \n gives us the line break. So what we will get now is a gap between hello, whatever the username is, and this next bit of text. So let's go. I will now do a simple addition for you. There we go. And we're keeping it quite nice, quite user-friendly, so that when someone reads it, they know what it's talking about. And another console.writeline with our open brackets and our speech marks. Please give me number 1 and press enter. And there's our semicolon so that we know, or the computer knows it's the end of the line. Now this is where it gets slightly more tricky, because now we need to set the numbers with the string input. So num1 equals convert dot to int 32. Now we need an open bracket, and we need to tell it we want to convert. No, we don't. We want console. If I could spell, that would help. Dot readline. Open brackets. And then at the end of that line, we do a semicolon. And that will set the first number as an int 32 number, ready to do our math. Now we can cheat, and we can copy and paste a piece of code, and we can have number 2 in there and just change that to a 2, and that's the second number. So now we've got the 2 values that we need, or we will have the 2 values that we need. We need to work out the answer. So num answer equals, now this is where it gets very complicated. Num answer equals num1 plus num2 with a semicolon. And that will then give us the answer to number 1 plus number 2. Let's give that information back to the user. So console dot writeline, open brackets, and let's have the answer W to the space and num1 plus, and now we need it to show the plus symbol, so we put the plus symbol in speech marks, plus num2 plus is. Now we need to put a space on either side of the is. We should also put it on either side of this plus, so that we actually have spaces between each of these. And then plus num answer. Now I've got, because I'm working quite large text, I've put text wrap on, which is what this blue arrow is and why I've come down here. And I've also just put that semicolon in completely the wrong place. You may not get, or probably won't get, unless we start writing very long pieces of code, an issue where text wrap comes in. It's purely come in with this because of the size of the font that I'm using, so that you are able to see it. Right, let's have a look at this and let's see if this works. So there we go. So now we can see the line break. So let's say number 1 is 1, and let's have number 2 is 3. Let's have number 2 is 2, which should give us an answer of 3, which it does. So that now works. There is one other thing we might want to do. At the moment, all of this is coming up as one long piece of text. We might not want it to do that. What we might want to do is clear the console of text. which point this /n doesn't make much of a difference, but what I will do is put it in here so that the answer is much easier to see. A simple command for clearing the console. Then console goes in there, but this time we want console.clear with brackets after it because it is still a method. What I'm also going to do is I'm just going to put a /n there so the press enter key to close isn't right up next to our answer. So let's see class clear, the console.clear in action and see what it does. Now, you're going to notice something. I've put Jess in there. You haven't seen what comes up after that. So we've lost, well, we haven't lost, but we now don't see the line of text where it says hello with the username. So let's come out of that. And you will notice that what is missing is this console.readline that I've got at the bottom of this one to allow the program to pause until the user presses enter. So let's put this in. So press the enter key to, let's change that to continue. And let's run the program. And now it says, hello, Jess. Press the enter key to continue. That text is cleared. And we are ready to do our simple sum. So let's say 45 plus 45, which should give us 90. And there is our basic program.